Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm glad to be here today. Now let's get into it. Today we're sticking with fake politics because it's still easy and talking about something a little more local for Capital City. We're going to get into the election cycle for Capital City's governor. As I've made very, very, very clear, Capital City is huge. As I've stated before, it is about the size of the state of Rhode Island. Because it's so inordinately large, I decided that the title of governor was more appropriate for its democratically elected leader, as opposed to mayor, for example. Before we get into their election and term cycle, let's get into the requirements it takes to be governor. A gubernatorial candidate must be at least 30 years old, a citizen of Capital City for at least 3 of the past 5 consecutive years, a natural-born citizen of the United Nations of Iblis, or a naturalized citizen of at least 5 years. Capital City's governors serve on a 5-year term for a maximum of 4 terms, although most will only serve 2. This is because running Capital City is tantamount to running another country inside of the Union. Again, the population of Capital City is roughly 100 million people, which is a lot for one dude to try and keep safe and happy. Also, Capital City's governor, while not the leader of the Union as a whole, is the legislative trendsetter for the rest of the Union's provinces. Whatever legislation the governor passes will generally inspire similar or opposing legislative packages in other provinces. Because of the enormous burden resting on their shoulders, very few governors seek a 3rd or even 4th term. Additionally, there is legislation in place that makes it intentionally difficult for an incumbent governor to seek a 3rd or 4th term, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So, what goes into electing a governor of Capital City? Well, the process is a little complicated. While governors serve 5-year terms, up to 2 of them are spent seeking re-election. We'll assume, for our purposes, that you are a new candidate seeking the governor's chair. First, you have to register as a candidate with your party. There are 4 major political parties who run the Union. If you're a non-mage, the Conservative Party is the National Gaussian Organization, the Gaussians. And the Progressive Party is the Union's People's Party, the Unionists. If you are a mage, the Conservative Party is the Mistocratic Alliance, the Mistocrats. And the Progressive Party is the National Linsel Party, the Linsels. For the sake of our example, we'll assume you'll be attempting to run as a Unionist candidate against Gaussian candidate Governor Lysander Hadria attempting to run for his 4th term. So, what do you have to do? The governor's election cycle takes place over 2 years in 3 parts. The first part is a 6-month period of the first year. Each of the party's candidates will go up against each other in a series of debates across the various districts of Capital City. After each debate, the attendees of the debates will vote for which candidate they believe has the best odds for winning the governor's chair. The catch here is that you can only attend the debate if you are a registered member of the party, so Gaussians cannot vote in the Unionist primary or Mistocrats cannot vote in the Gaussian primary. In an effort to prevent people from fraudulently voting multiple times, registered voters can only vote after the debate that takes place in their registered district. Independent voters are allowed to attend all of the debates, but can only cast their vote in one of them. After the final debate for each party, all of the candidates' votes will be combined and tallied. Each party has their own rules for how they handle selecting which candidate becomes the party's nominee in the primaries. The next month is a sort of rest period for campaigning while the parties handle their nominee selections. The Gaussians hold runoff elections for their top 2 performing candidates if none of them have support from the majority of their voters. The Unionists simply pick whichever candidate got the most votes. The Mistocrats use a delegate system, awarding delegates proportionally to the number of votes a candidate received. At the end of the debates, the delegates convene for one final private debate with the candidates. The delegates are now free to choose whichever candidate they feel is best to become nominee, and whichever candidate gets the most delegate votes after their convention becomes the nominee. The Linsel use a runoff delegate system. They also assign delegates based on votes received, but only the top 2 performers, if one has not secured a majority vote, will go on to debate in the delegate convention after the final primary debate. Whichever candidate receives a majority here becomes the nominee. So you, my Unionist candidate, will just have to get the most votes to become the Unionist nominee. If you get 27.01% of the votes and the next guy behind you gets 27%, well, guess what? You win. Congratulations. Move on to part 2. The second part is the next 6 months after the month-long rest period. The secondaries pit each party's nominee against their opposing group's nominee to become the gubernatorial nominee. What that means is that the Gaussian nominee competes against the Unionist nominee for the non-mage vote, and the Mistocrat nominee competes against the Lensel nominee for the mage vote. So you, my beautiful Unionist child, have to potentially compete against Gaussian nominee Governor Lysander Hadria, who has at least 13 years' experience running Capital City. Good luck. Anyway, there's nothing remarkable about the secondary election. You have your debates with your political opponent, you trade jabs and propaganda, and you do whatever it takes to win. Near the end of the 6 months is election day, when your non-mage or mage caucus votes for whichever candidate they believe is capable of being Capital City's governor. After the votes are counted and tallied, a non-mage and mage nominee are selected to compete against one another in the general election. Continuing with the example, you have spent the past 6 months competing against maybe Lysander. It's been harsh and brutal and just plain mean, but election day comes around and at the end of the night, you finish out with 55% of the non-mage vote. Congratulations, you are now the non-mage nominee for Capital City's governor. Now we move on to the last part of the election cycle. The next year of the election cycle pits each group's nominee against the other. Generally speaking, the nominee's party provides most of the funding for the general election, although it is not unusual for their counterpart to provide support. Generally, the Gaussians and Unionists and the Mistocrats and the Lensel will aid one another, although there are occasions where the Gaussians and Mistocrats work together against the Unionists and the Lensel. Very rarely will three parties team up against one. There are several more debates, town halls, interviews, etc., that go on during this year, but once election day rolls around again, the rules of voting shift around a bit. Capital City has 133 different sub-districts within the city's limits. Each sub-district counts as a point. Whoever wins the popular vote in a sub-district gets that point. Whoever has the most points at the end of the night wins. That's it. There are no special rules here, just a semi-complicated popular vote. So, continuing with our example, you, the Unionist nominee running against whoever the Magi put up, have to win the popular vote in at least 66 of Capital City's sub-districts to become governor. We'll assume you've won 78 because I'm feeling generous. Congratulations, you have now become governor-elect of Capital City. We'll get into what happens to an outgoing governor at the end of your term. Every incoming or re-elected governor has about 3 years where they can focus on advancing their legislative policies. But once that 4th year rolls around, policy takes a bit of a back seat, unless the governor opts to retire after their term is up, in which case they can spend the remaining 2 years focusing on policy. If a governor does wish to be re-elected, there are some rules that must be followed. For a first-term governor seeking a second term, their party generally skips hosting primary elections. It's seen as an unnecessary expense and allows for the governor to fundraise more money for the more important secondary and general elections. This is more of a tradition than a rule, however. The actual rule is that all incumbent governors are subject to an election evaluation by the highest-ranked members of their party, which determines their ability to continue serving in their position. In the rare cases a first-term governor is subject to this evaluation, it can have one of 3 outcomes. 1. The governor is perfectly fit and able to continue serving and will be chosen as the party's nominee for the secondary elections. 2. The governor is fit and able to continue serving, but must participate in the primary elections against other candidates for the party's nomination. 3. The governor is not fit or able to continue serving and is barred from participating in the primary elections. For most first-term governors, it is assumed that the evaluation will result in the first outcome. Therefore, their parties don't bother with an election evaluation for the incumbent governor if they decide to seek a second term. Now, if the incumbent governor is incredibly unpopular with either the voters or the party, they will most likely have to undergo an evaluation. Most governors who are that unpopular, however, opt to retire instead. For second-term governors seeking a third term, they must undergo an evaluation by their party. If the governor enjoys the benefit of widespread popular support, then the evaluation will generally end favorably for them. In most cases, however, this evaluation ends with the incumbent governor having to compete in the party primary or being forced to retire. For third seeking fourth, the governor not only has to undergo an evaluation, but they cannot automatically be chosen as their party's candidate. Not only that, but this evaluation is much more intense and rigorous than any other before it. There are several stages of mental examinations, background checks, character evaluations, interviews, and public opinion polls. Basically, if at any point you fail this evaluation, you will not be allowed to run for a fourth term. Very few governors are allowed to run for a fourth term, even fewer win the election, and none of them have ever finished a full fourth term. All fourth-term governors have resigned in disgrace. So, what happens to a governor who either retires voluntarily, by force, or just loses in the primary or secondary vote? Well, if they're still in the fourth year of their term, then they make a few final policy pushes and start setting up their legacy project, which is intended as an altruistic gift back to Capital City that improves the lives of their citizens. In the fifth year, they put their focus entirely on their legacy project and nominate people to receive the prestigious Governor's Medal of Service, an award to those of exceptional character and or examples of great talent or service that Capital City fosters in its communities, as well as the highest civilian award in the Union. After the election, whether by defeat or not, the outgoing governor holds many public and private meetings with the governor-elect to share some words of wisdom and advice. There will also be an award ceremony for the Governor's Medal of Service sometime after the election, but before the inauguration of the governor-elect. Each outgoing governor also has a ceremonial portrait painted of them the day before the inauguration to match the one they had painted before their own. After that, they retire with a decent pension and move on to do what they wish with their private lives. Not many governors will continue their political careers into the national legislative bodies. Now, while this is a natural transition point to move into the other parts of being governor, such as staff, who keeps the governor in check, what happens if the governor is removed from office, this video is just about what it takes to get elected as governor. I'll most likely come back to it, because fake politics is easy, but we'll stop here. Until then, join me back on Monday when I'll move away from the characters and talk about Retribution's unholy crusade. I hope to see you then. Hi, I'm Gabe, and it took me a lot longer than it should have to record this in Slate. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss the next one. If you want more content from me, consider following me on Twitter, where eventually I'll tweet some more. If you want to learn more about anything I'm talking about or catch some details I missed, consider buying my books. Links are in the description below. Also consider checking out the Tumblr, where I post side stories and art about the books that I can't really put anywhere else. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.